NBC.
Tonight, President Nixon is scheduled to deliver his State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress. And at least part of it is expected to be on the state of Richard Nixon as well.
Mr. Speaker and Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues and our guests, I would like to add a personal word with regard to an issue that has been of great concern to all Americans over the past year. I refer, of course, to the investigations of the so-called Watergate affair. As you know, I have provided to the special prosecutor voluntarily a great deal of material. I believe that I have provided all the material that he needs to conclude his investigations and to proceed to prosecute the guilty and to clear the innocent. I believe the time has come to bring that investigation and the other investigations of this matter to an end. 1 year of Watergate is enough.
44 years ago today, Richard Nixon delivered his final State of the Union address, and all these years later, the headlines are eerily similar. The appointment of a special prosecutor, special counsel in this case, officials forced out of their posts, charges filed against people close to the president. So are we on a slow roll toward another Saturday night massacre when the president ordered the special prosecutor fired and the top 2 officials of the Justice Department quit rather than carry out the order? Joining us now to talk about this from Washington, NBC News senior correspondent and former nightly news anchor Tom Brokaw, who covered the Watergate scandal. And here with me in the newsroom, NBC News presidential historian Michael Beschloss. Tom, let's start with you. President Nixon started that State of the Union address by talking about Watergate. We don't think that Donald Trump is going to mention anything about the Russia investigation tonight. But as this has gone on, you have been pretty reluctant to say that this was at all similar to Watergate. And then this morning, we heard you kind of change your tune, saying there's a whiff of the tactics that we saw during the days of Watergate. Tell me why you feel there's been a shift.
Well, first of all, to answer your first question, after the last 2 years, the last thing I want to try to do is to predict what Donald Trump is likely to do. First of all, that's the first thing I want to go on the record about saying that. Secondly, I have really resisted comparing what's been going on with Watergate because I thought Watergate was unique, it was historic. There was a criminal procedure, a criminal system operated out of the White House. The president's aides went to jail. They just didn't get interviewed, and the whole country understood at the end what was going on. Now, the atmospherics are very much like they were at that time. You have partisans saying that they've got other evidence of corruption in the investigation itself. I don't know what we're going to read in this memorandum that has been released, but some commentators who are sympathetic to the president are saying it's going to be the greatest scandal in the history of this country. That seems to me to be an overreach based on what we are seeing so far. If it is that, we ought to see that memo right now. Because, in fact, the country wants to get this cleaned up and move on in some fashion. But just when we seem to be taking a step forward, then there's another step back. The greatest thing that we learned from Watergate is that sunshine is the greatest disinfectant. The more that the country knows about what's going on, the better they are able to deal with it. Not just the voters, but the Republicans and the Democrats alike.
Michael, you're the expert on this and presidents and the circumstances surrounding presidents and what the mood was like, atmosphere in a country while they were in office. Have you seen a time that is more partisan than we are living right now?
Not in recent times. I mean, sometimes people say it's the most partisan time in American history. I'd go back to 1859, slavery. People were pretty divided, led to a real civil war. But it's pretty bad, and it's a very different atmosphere from the time of Richard Nixon. And as you were talking, and as Tom was talking, you know, I sort of think, I always complain about the fact that Donald Trump has zero interest in history and doesn't learn from history. I wonder if some people in his entourage at least have studied the Saturday Night Massacre in which Richard Nixon fired his special prosecutor, Archibald Cox, and maybe what they have concluded is that It's not that Nixon did it, it's the way he did it, and that maybe he would have gotten away with it is if he had done it more slowly and more obliquely, and maybe that's what we're seeing today.
Folks say that if there was or posture at least, that if there was a Fox News back then while Nixon was in power, Nixon would not have had to resign. What do you think of accusations like that, Tom?
Well, I think we have to, especially in our business, just deal with the facts as we find them out on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. You know, part of the condition, part of the environment that has changed so much is social media, quite honestly. Everybody has something to say about it, and they flood the screens, left, right, and clean, true and not true. And so it's very hard for the American public to sort out what is true and what's not true. You know, what I say to a lot of people who come up to me and they'll say, "You're not going to believe what I read on the internet today." And I say, "You're right, I'm not going to believe what you read on the internet today." So we need to deal with this in a judicial, factual way.
Truer words never spoken.
And we're not going to resolve it this afternoon. And I think the country deserves to get the evidence before them and make an examination of it. I think that it has never been more partisan in my entire lifetime. During Watergate, I would go to Capitol Hill. I'd leave the White House and go up to speak to both Democrats and Republicans on the Hill, and we would trade information. I'd say, "What do you think is going to happen here?" And they'd say, "Well, what's going on down there?" And I would tell them, Republican leaders and Democratic leaders were not going out and finding a microphone or going online, because they couldn't do it then, and flooding the gates, if you will, with a lot of speculation. So most of all, I think the country has to take a deep breath and say, "Show me the money."
Absolutely. And show me the facts, and let's stick to the facts, and let's not get alarmist and start overselling things that don't need to be oversold. Let's just keep it level and measured. Michael, I don't like relying on numbers too much. I think we rely too heavily on numbers sometimes and don't really get the pulse of the people and see what people are feeling rather than the questions they answer to somebody on the phone. But let's talk about this one. This Gallup poll on the president's approval rating. It's low nationally. It's in the 30s nationally, but when you look at Donald Trump's approval rating in the states, it's much higher. The states that he won, it's much higher. It's in the 40s.
Right.
Disapproval, though, is in the 50s in the states that he won.
Right.
Should anybody look into that?
Yeah. And
read anything into that?
Yeah, I think what they should read into that is that if you look at numbers in midterm elections over the last 50 or 60 years, and try to explain in advance what was going to happen, one of the numbers that tells you most of all is what is the approval rating of the president who is from the party that you're talking about. So if you're going to use that kind of history, the fact that Donald Trump is encountering heavy weather in terms of Gallup and other approval ratings, that suggests he's going to have a really rough time this fall in the midterms unless things change.
Tom, we don't have much time, but does the State of the Union matter, this address?
Well, it depends on what he has to say tonight. I'll be very interested to see if he stays to his script. If he gives a speech very much like he did at Davos, which we're hearing he's likely to do, that probably will play pretty well. It won't change his opponents, but it may calm the nerves of a lot of people. But here's the most important thing about Donald Trump as the president. He believes everybody in the country works for him. He believes everybody in the government works for him in some fashion. He didn't have a board of directors when he was running his Trump enterprises in New York. He got away with what he wanted to, which included not paying a lot of bills and kind of skipping other things. Whatever he wanted to do, he got away with it. Now he can't believe that the Justice Department is not under his thumb in some fashion. And I think that that's having a big impact in how he conducts himself. And, of course, the country knows better than that. And when he comes to the Hill tonight, there are going to be Republicans standing up and cheering, but a lot of them are going to be saying, God, I hope I made the right choice here.